It's another week here at 101 with Mark Bichachi, and this week we want to get straight into it and talk about infrastructure. What is infrastructure? Infrastructure are the facilities and systems necessary for households and businesses to be able to function in a society. In other words, it's not just roads, but it's everything around you that allows your society to exist. And that infrastructure is therefore divided for the purposes of this show into energy creation and evacuation, water supply and water drainage, including other water facilities such as sports. Number 3, the air in terms of air evacuation, air transport, and of course land use, land-based transport, trains, roads, and what have you. Now, why is infrastructure important? As I've said before, infrastructure is basically the underpinning that makes not only your business thrive, but even your very household. For it to be able to function, you need a bit of infrastructure for that to happen. Now, of course, throughout history, human beings have invested in infrastructure to ensure that they were able to survive and thrive within the places they settled. So in the past, you'd see human beings settling around rivers and lakes. Those who settled along lakes built boats. Those who settled along rivers began to irrigate using the water that was there. Of course, in the modern times, this has changed with the invention of flying, the invention of trains, and the invention, of course, of the motor vehicle, bicycles, and what have you. Now, infrastructure is critical and it is important simply because there is no economy that can grow where the infrastructure is not enough to sustain the growth that is necessary. Now, this means that we have to take a historical look, and in a past show I talked about the fact that Kenya has a 25-year infrastructure deficit. That means that for 25 years of our history, we did not build the roads, the rail network in a way that was able to meet the growing demands of our growing economy. Here's what I mean. In the 80s and 90s, what happened to our rail infrastructure was that it fell apart. Yes, indeed it did. And our trains ground to a halt. Now, whereas this may have been taken as a function of corruption, it is not just the fact that the train sector was stolen from, the rail sector was stolen from. That's not just the issue. The issue is also that without a functioning railway, the country lost. And how did the country lose? Number 1, we lost lives. How did we lose lives? Because of the number of people who were traveling, of course, and in bad roads going towards Mombasa. We saw a lot of road accidents and a lot of lives were lost. A lot of people went into hospital, and that is a social price that we paid for not having adequate rail infrastructure. Now, let me pause there and give you the consequences of bad infrastructure. A lot of the time, you see the direct consequences in terms of it is more expensive to transport goods, services, and people. But also, there is the cost to the health of the society in that, number 1, you've got more stress. Number 2, you've got more accidents. Number 3, even access to healthcare is hampered simply because you don't have the right infrastructure to get there in time. So we must understand, underpinning this particular video, you must understand that the cost of bad infrastructure goes beyond the literal money and has societal problems. Now, back to the 25 years of no infrastructure, the infrastructure deficit. So the railway line is a good example. We know that for a long time during the Moi years, the railway lines ground to a halt, meaning by the time Mwai Kibaki was coming into office and he was trying to revive Kenya Railways, East African Railways, and things like that, he was trying to deal with a deficit. Number 2, there was also a deficit in our road network. A lot of the highway, let's look at the Nakuru-Nairobi highway. the Nakuru Eldoret Highway, the Mombasa Nairobi Highway. Most of these highways were redone, refurbished during the Kibaki era, and therefore what Kibaki achieved, and here's the number of kilometers of road he achieved, you can clearly see that there is still a deficit, which is why the Jubilee administration today is still focused on the road network. We did not fare much better when it comes to the water services, simply because, number one, let us look at the port of Mombasa. It was old, it was not refurbished, and therefore we needed more space there. So again, we also had issue with the water infrastructure. The same you saw during both Kibaki and Uhuru's regime. We've seen a renovation of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, its expansion, its upgrade into an A-class airport to be able to meet the standards of that were needed for us even to fly direct from Kenya to the US of A. All these renovations are highlighted by the fact that we had 25 years of infrastructure deficit. Now, what does that mean? The infrastructure deficit meant that our economic growth was slowed. How was it slowed? Number one, how do we evacuate goods that have been produced either in factories or in our farms? How do we get them to market soon enough? Let us take an example of flower farms in Naivasha and the road that was newly renovated, the Moi South Lake Road, which was newly renovated. You can see they were able now to evacuate their flowers quicker, and the faster they were in the market, the better price they got for their flowers. This is, of course, a no-brainer. But secondly, look at the value of land around Thika Road before it was developed. Let us look at the value of land near the SGR before it was developed. So there is definite immediate benefit. However, infrastructure is not always supposed to have a quid pro quo. And I've had this argument before where people say, does the SGR pay for itself? Now, quick correction. Infrastructure and why we pay taxes is not supposed to necessarily pay for itself. For example, I am sure there is a road leading to your grandmother's house, to your mother's house, and to your house. Now, those are not necessarily roads that we can say how much money are we getting back by the simple fact that we built this road. But is it improving the quality of life of Kenyan citizens? Yes, it is. The SGR is evacuating people out of Nairobi to Mombasa faster and safer. So we are saving lives. How much is a Kenyan life, for example? We are also saving time. It takes a shorter time than being on the road. At the same time, the road to your house, for example, is saving your time in terms of getting to work on time. It's saving your life because there are less accidents. Number three, it's also improving your security because there is no pothole to allow robbers to waylay you. So the benefits of infrastructure cannot be understated, and those benefits cannot just be scored in a balance sheet. Now, that does not answer the question of what is a good infrastructure project. How do we classify a good infrastructure project? This is quite simple. Number one, it must be delivered on time and as per cost estimates. We do not want to spend more money than we should on our infrastructure projects. Number two, it needs to be corruption-free, because we know one of the things that increases the cost of our projects is, of course, the amount of money lost to corruption. But critical after that is something we call the use of local labor. Now, this is something that is enshrined in our laws, that when we build these projects, 70% of the labor at least needs to be local, and any expatriate who works on these projects needs to have specialized skills. But it does not end there. The expatriate working on these projects needs to be able to transfer those skills to a local. So what is the other thing about a good infrastructure project? It is the skill transfer to the local people. So you've got to watch out for those particular things to ensure that our projects make sense. Now, to the germane question. What are the key projects that we need to look out for that underpin this period and this epoch in Kenyan political, and economic history. I will start you off with our energy sector. Our energy sector is highly ranked in the world when it comes to geothermal power. We've got a lot more geothermal power than many other countries, and therefore Kenyan on that particular note is doing very well. But we are also highly ranked in terms of, believe it or not, green energy. Yes, green energy. We have the largest solar farm in Eastern and Central Africa, situated in Garissa, launched 2 years ago by President Uhuru Kenyatta. We also house one of the largest wind farm projects in Turkana that creates a lot of power for the country using wind energy in Turkana. What does all this green energy mean? What it means is, number one, we will be able to reduce the cost of energy in this country. But number two, we are also able to produce our energy in a green environment. And that is why Kenya is considered among the top 30 good countries in the world. In other words, countries that do a lot more good to the environment than other countries. And that's why Kenya is top 30 despite our status as a developing nation. So that is the power sector. But it doesn't stop there. The power sector also, Kenya has rolled out the Rural Electrification Authority, which was recently renamed REREC. And what have we done? We are also ensuring that the grid, the energy grid, is able to expand to every village in this country. In fact, last check, we had over 8,000 schools across the country, schools and urban centers connected to the power grid. What does this mean? It means, number one, people have access to electricity, which follows they have access to technology, which means they can innovate and do better business. So that's electricity. We go back to our gas and oil. We have one of the biggest oil pipelines in the region that submits millions of tons of oil, not only to parts of Kenya on time, but also to our neighboring countries, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and the like. So in the energy sector, Kenya is leading in the region. That's good news. Let's get into water. We've got the Mombasa port, which there's dredging going on. It's being upgraded, both in terms of systems, but also the capacity it can carry. It's being connected to the SGR to ensure there's more than one option of evacuating goods out of the port of Mombasa. We are also building the Lamu port. We are almost done with it, which is part of our LAPSET project, which means Kenya will have 2 natural ports that will be able to handle a lot more cargo. Now, this I need to emphasize. Cargo and cargo transportation is big business. Dubai is in it, Singapore is in it, and all the countries that have big ports make a lot of money out of their ports, including countries like China. Now, if you want to access the market, if you want to access Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Eastern Congo, Chad, Tanzania, Kenya is your best bet. And that's why we need to also look at our infrastructure projects, not just as serving the people of Kenya, but also serving the hinterland of Africa. We need to position ourselves as the gateway of Africa. Ethiopia is trying, Tanzania is trying, Kenya is leading, and we need to keep that lead, which is why the Lamu port is important. But we've not stopped there. After the port of Lamu, we've got the port in Kisumu. The port in Kisumu is, of course, was launched the other day by the president and the retired Prime Minister Raila Odinga. And what is it about? It's simply about, can we access the Ugandan, Tanzanian market better using the lake called Victoria? Why is this critical? Infrastructure is about enabling business. Now, air freight is expensive. The cheapest way to transport things has always been through the water. It is slower, but it is cheaper, and a lot of the time, that's where much of the goods are transported. If we have options in our ports, it means we become important, and that importance simply means we are earning money as a country for handling the transportation of goods into the hinterland of Africa. This is a business expansion strategy, and it's one of the surest ways of actually ensuring that your economy grows. So far, in terms of waterways and what we are using them for, we are doing very well. But before I leave the subject of water, let me mention something in two perspectives. Number one, water also affects the agricultural output of a country. Now, Kenya, as you know, the most famous dam projects were Kimwarer and Arod, but I want to assure you that there are 17, yes, you heard me right, 17 other dams being built across the country, and I just want to read the list to you. Thwake Dam, Karimenu Dam, Thiba Dam, Murunyi Sioi Dam in West Pokot. You've got Bosto Dam in Bomet, Ruiru 2 Dam in Kiambu, Mwache Dam in Kwale County, Soin Koru Dam in the border of Kisumu and Kericho counties, Ndarugu Dam in Kiambu, Malewa Dam in Nyandarua County. Then you've got Kabazi Dam in Nakuru, Kithino Dam in Meru, Crocodile Joyce Dam in Isiole, Bute Dam in Wajir, Amaya Dam in Baringo, and Loliandi Dam in Kericho. These are the dams that we know other than Aror and Kimwarer. Now, why is this important? This feeds into the one water supply of the different agricultural projects that we have across the country, water supply to our citizens to improve the quality of life and quality of health. Yes, you heard me. Those are the number of dam projects we have in this country. Of course, we've got many other projects that is in terms of waste disposal. You know, for example, the sewage treatment facility in Ruai, Kenya, Nairobi, is being expanded as well. So in terms of our water projects, we have a lot of water projects that are ongoing that actually will affect not only the quality of life, but the quality of business in this country, Wapi, Shangwe na Vigelegele. Let us now look at air freight and how we do it in Kenya. Kenya has 3 international airports, JKIA, the one in Mombasa, Moi International Airport, and of course, Eldoret International Airport. This, just by number, is the largest number of airports, international airports of any country. Not to mention, of course, you can fly to Kisumu, fly to Malindi, fly from Wilson, fly from JKIA. We have a lot of options in this country, much more than any other country. The number of airlines just operating out of Wilson, JKIA, is impressive. In fact, our only competition in Ethiopia is also fighting hard to catch up with Kenya's airport capacity and air freight capacity. Rwanda, the much touted new airport, is of course much further inland Africa than Nairobi. Nairobi is much more centrally located, much more developed, better infrastructure. So far in terms of air freight, Kenya is leading both in terms of number of airports, quantity of flights, and of course the amount of cargo being carried out. Ethiopia is fighting hard to catch up with us. So is Rwanda. Uganda and Tanzania do not hold a flame to us. In fact, Tanzania bought its first 3 planes hardly 2 years ago. I've just explained to you a little bit of the infrastructure we have. Now, this is end of part 1. We are going to do part 2, and we're going to discuss the other points of infrastructure that build up the infrastructural basis for the economy of Kenya. Join me for part 2, won't you?